Okay, everybody, welcome to week 4 of Medical Terminology, winter semester 2017. Glad to have you back. As usual, first, a few housekeeping items. Make sure your spelling counts and make sure you're understanding how to spell the words. I posted on this in announcements a few days ago, but make sure that that's right. Make sure you're writing combining forms. You're including the correct format. That's also in the announcements. And make sure you're not putting parentheses around these or they'll get marked wrong. And then the other thing that I found as I was going through the quizzes, the scores were much better this week. I was very happy with how far the scores came along. That's going to be the normal pattern for the course. So I'm happy with that. Make sure we continue on that trajectory as we try to prepare for the midterm. The other thing that I realize is that a lot of the things that are getting missed are covered both in the lecture. So make sure you're reviewing that probably at the beginning of the week. And then I would review it again right before you take the quiz. And then also make sure you're going through all the posts in the helpful hints discussion. I went through that board extensively this week and read every post there, and almost all the questions that were asked on the quiz were also covered in that discussion board. One of the students had picked a word that pertained to the quiz and they had broken it down. And so if you're going over that discussion board, if you're using the BYU Idaho learning model where you're learning from other people and you're not just doing your own thing, you're going to be very successful on the quizzes. So make sure you're using that. And also, as far as the helpful hints discussion board, make sure you're looking for my post before you post and you're following those instructions so that we can make that board actually helpful versus people just getting on there. What I found in semesters past is saying, oh, I use flashcards, or oh, I do this, or oh, I do that, and it doesn't become helpful. I think the way that we can use it is really in a more application based system there, and that application will help you to be prepared for your quizzes. As far as the digestive system goes, this is in your book, and there's a lot of really good diagrams in your book, so I would suggest you get the book out and you look at this, because a lot of this quiz is about anatomy. It's about how the digestive system works from the time you put food in your mouth, your tongue, your teeth, your pharynx, your larynx, your pharynx, your esophagus, your stomach, and then the tract down the intestine system, and some of the supporting structures there. So make sure you kind of understand that path. You can recreate that path in your mind. I think you'll do very well on this. So as far as things that you need to pay attention to this week, of course, as I said before, and some people got fouled up on this, anytime you've got a word like mouth that has multiple root words, they're going to quiz you on it. So you need to know and you need to be prepared for that. So there's two roots and combining forms for mouth, and that's oral and that's stomato, okay? So make sure you understand these, right? Oral is pertaining to the mouth, and stomatodynia, right, is pain in the mouth. And then also inside the mouth is sialo, which is salivary glands. So make sure you're paying attention to these terms and understanding them. Tongue, again, a couple different words, all right? Glosso. Well, there's the glossopharyngeal nerve, so that's a nerve that does the tongue and the pharynx. And then there's glossectomy, which is partial or full removal of the tongue, right? So know your suffixes, know your root words, and then lingual, right, pertaining to the tongue. So both of those are tongue words, and you need to know that in order to be prepared for the quiz. Cheek is buccal, right? So buccal, right? All right, so that's pertaining to the cheek. Lip, chylo, and labial. So chylosis is a disease, something abnormal with the lips, and labial, right? So lots of times this pertains to the lips in your mouth, but also we hear this also down in the vagina where we have the labia majora and the labia minora. which are lip type structures down in that region. So labia, labio is lip, chylo is lip. So make sure you know and understand those. Teeth, of course, dento, so this should be fairly into your dentist, right? Dent is teeth, or orthodontist. Odonto, right? This is straightening of the teeth. That's what an orthodontist does. So ortho is straightening. Odont, that's the teeth right there. So those are kind of easy ways to try and remember those, something that you're very common with. Esophagus, right? Esophagus, right, is esophageal, right? And there's a lot of terms that go along with this, right? Esophagodynia, esophagealgia, esophageal spasm, and esophageal stenosis, right? So stenosis is some hardening, some stricture of the esophagus. Spasm, is spasm, and algia is pain in the esophagus. So make sure you understand. So we're kind of going through this, right? Mouth. And inside the mouth, we got teeth and we got tongues, and then we go to the pharynx, and then we go down to the esophagus, right? And so I actually have these reversed a little bit, but here's your pharynx, right? So you get pharyngitis, right? And lots of times you have to go on antibiotics for different kinds of pharyngitis, depending on if it's bacterial pharyngitis or viral pharyngitis. But you can get that back there in the back of your throat, where you get very sore. Then we come down to the stomach, which is gastro, right? So you have gastroesophageal reflux disease. This is commonly known as GERD, and the layman's term for this is heartburn, right? So, but it's two root words linked together by combining forms, gastroesophageal, and then AL is the prefix, right, pertaining to the the stomach and the esophagus, and it's a reflux disease pertaining to that. Some other things, gastritis, one of the most common kinds that we're dealing with here is peptic ulcer disease, and that's usually caused by a bacteria called H. pylori, which they need to treat you for. So if you're somebody who's gotten any ulcers, that's something you probably need to get checked out. But there's that, and then other terms associated with the gastritis to help you with that. So from the stomach, we go into the small intestine, right? So entero is kind of this just general term for small intestine. And then there's different parts of the small intestine. But you can just have terms that relate to the whole small intestine, like enteropathy or enterocele. And that's actually a herniation of the small intestines. And it's usually in the down through the vagina. Common in pregnant women, where they'll get this outpouching of their intestines in this retrovaginal space. And so these are just some terms associated with entero, right? Now, the small intestine is breaking down further into three parts. And the first part is the duodenum, and so that's duodenal, or duodeno is the combining form. That's the first part of the small intestine. Second part is jejunal, all right, and the third part is ileo. And the ileo, or the ileum, is what connects to your large intestine, and that's what we're going to go over next. So ileocecal junction, right? That's the junction between the last part of the small intestine and the first part of the large intestine. So and you can use these words like jejunectomy, like if you had a problem in your small intestine and they had to go remove that middle part of the small intestine, that would be a jejunectomy. And then you see jejunal ileo, right? That's where we're moving from the second to the third part of the small intestine. So there are three parts to that. Make sure you understand that. The large intestine, it has parts as well, right? It's got a broad term, colo, that's broad for large intestine. So colonal, right? So here we go, two terms again for large intestine. Make sure you know and understand that they both mean large intestine, right? You could get a multiple choice that says click all the terms that mean large intestine, and you're going to need to click colo and colonal. They're both pertaining to the large intestine. So, and you can use suffixes or prefixes on these words, right? Ulcerative colitis, right? This is inflammation of the large intestine that causes ulcerative changes, a precursor to cancer sometimes. So make sure you understand that, right? And then within the colon, you got the different parts. You've got the sigmoid, you've got the appendix, and then we're going to talk about the last parts here in just a second. But one of the most common things that we hear about all the time is appendicitis. This is lower right quadrant pain in your belly. You can see the appendix right down here, and this is what gets inflamed. This little outpouching off the appendix right after you come out the ileocecal junction, which is the combination of the last part of the small intestine with the first part of the large intestine, and then you can get inflammation right here, and that's appendicitis. Usually requires surgical removal via appendectomy is the term that we use there. So if you go around, the colon's got the ascending, the transverse, and the descending part of the colon. And then you come into this last part, which is the terminal end of the large intestine. And this is recto, procto, and ano, right? These are the terminal end of the large intestine. And, these are some of the terms that you can use down there, but that's this part right here. You can see here the rectum is right here, and here's the anal and the anal canal. So those are there. So some of the structures that support the digestive system, of course, the liver, right? And so that's hepato, right? And then you get hepatoma and hepatomegaly and hepatitis and different terms that roll around the liver, but all those hepatos pertaining to the liver. And the pancreas, this is where we get insulin from. So it's common now with diabetes being so prevalent in our population, right? But you can get pancreatitis, so that's another structure that pertains here. And then, of course, your gallbladder. And make sure you know and understand these terms, that cholecysto is the gallbladder itself. So you can get cholecystitis, that's inflammation of the gallbladder. Then you've got vessels that go there, cholangio, right? So they sometimes do a cholangiogram to see if there's any obstruction of those vessels going to the gallbladder. And then you've got cholelith, or chole itself pertains to the bile. That's the liquid that is stored inside of the gallbladder. And if you get a stone in there, you get a stone of the gallbladder, you get a cholelith, right? A gallstone. And then choledocho is the actual duct that goes from the gallbladder, to the duodenum that allows that bile to be transferred in for digestion. And so you can actually get a stone here. And so if you get a stone in the gallbladder, you get cholecystolithiasis, or cholelithiasis is more commonly what it's called. But if you get it in the duct, which is something I've had before, you get choledocholithiasis. So depending on where that stone is at, it depends on how we name that stone. So make sure you understand that around this gallbladder, there's the bladder itself, there's the duct, there's the vessel, and that'll be important for your quiz. So just some spiritual thoughts. We continue to learn about learning. I hope that you'll take a serious study of this as you go through the semester and consider each one of these. But as we consider the brother of Jared and how he learned, we learned that he had a question. He had many questions, and the first of those was, he went to the Lord to request that his people would not be confounded and be able to stay together. That was a request from his brother. He went to the Lord on how they were supposed to get across the ocean and build ships and have light in their boats and many. So we learned that it's important to have questions. It's important to question things. So that's one thing we learned. It's also important to understand where the fountain of knowledge is at. And that's one thing I think we've really learned from the brother of Jared, and that I take home from him, is that he understood that he needed to go to God for answers, and that God is the fountain of knowledge. But at the same time, he understood there were things he could do for himself. So we need to understand when we can solve a problem and when we need to go to God. He endured 3 hours of chastisement, so it's okay to be humbled. And he was faithful when given answers. So when he got promptings, he followed through with them. If you'll do those things, your learning will be enhanced. Have a great week.